Hey everyone. So I decided that the video that I was gonna do, that I had planned to record, I was gonna push it back a bit because I really want to discuss something about the strange dreams that I've been having recently. I dream a lot, but even by my standards, these have been exceptionally bizarre. And I continue to see the same themes over and over again. And by bizarre, I mean like extremely linear and extremely vivid. Most of the time, my dreams are very disjointed. Like you'll be jumping from one event to the next without any sort of connection between them. But these dreams seem to have a very strange sense of continuity running throughout the whole dream. And because of this, they seem like they're really long lasting. Now, the reason I decided to do this video and discuss my dreams is to see whether any of you have also been having strange dreams lately, because it could be an indication of the kind of wider psychic trends that have been occurring, over the past few years, and it could be an indication of a kind of wider psychic disturbance. And so there might be value in kind of divulging what I've been seeing in my dreams. I am kind of a person who does observe the world a lot, and so it's possible my unconscious is attempting to kind of play out a narrative of what I think could be happening or what could potentially happen in the future. Jung noticed that right before the outbreak of the First World War, his patient's dreams clearly forecasted some kind of apocalyptic event. And there's no reason to think that the predictive capacity of dreams has anything to do with mysticism or any mystical connotations whatsoever. There are good logical reasons to think that dreams have a predictive capacity. They have the capacity to kind of observe the present and then use this to kind of forecast the future, which makes perfect sense because if you have some understanding of what could potentially occur in the future, it gives you an advantage. So dreams in general have two functions. At least we could discuss two functions now. The first is that they illuminate the self, so they can give the dreamer a kind of description of his psyche, of his unconscious mind, and point him to various things which he was otherwise unaware of. But the dream can also be about the external world, and I think there's good reason to think that that's the primary function. The dream is trying to give you information about your environment that you aren't, necessarily conscious of, including what could potentially happen in the future. And both of these can be simultaneously true, in fact. Of course, since I'm the dreamer, my dreams obviously reflect me to a certain extent, but they can also reflect the external world. If a dream is predictive, it's the psyche attempting to forecast something that could potentially happen based on the patterns which it recognizes. And again, the unconscious has a very good pattern recognition capability. That's what the unconscious does. It kind of blends different things together, different ideas together, to show you new information. So what were the contents of my dreams in particular that I've been having recently? Well, the first and most apparent and most persistent symbol that keeps appearing is that of werewolves. I have seen werewolves or other like wolf-like imagery almost every night for like the past 2 weeks. And I think the idea of a werewolf is a very straightforward symbol in terms of what that's trying to indicate. And my dreams usually involve me either being hunted by werewolves or I see werewolves or wolves in like the distance and I'm just observing them. Now, for anyone who wants clarification about what werewolves represent, it's a rather unambiguous depiction of the more beastly side of a person. The animal that's within, so to speak, like our darker impulses that kind of result from our animal instincts. Normally our instincts are kind of shackled by society and shackled by our own morals and what we believe is morally right, but always working beneath the surface is that kind of unconscious animalistic desire to do what animals do and to just follow our instincts without kind of any concerns for morals whatsoever. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. A human being is just an animal that has been tamed by society. Society tames these animals so that we can kind of live in a more productive manner and kind of, be more spiritual in a sense. But fundamentally, that animal is inside us, is always there. It's in all of us. And it's always trying to get out. And when the chips are down, it will get out and it kind of will escape. There's always a great risk of this happening at the individual level and at the collective level. And in fact, at the collective level, you see this quite often. When people get into large groups, that animality is much stronger. It's almost like this pack instinct, that herd mentality kicks in. And that's why you see things like what happened recently in South Africa, where there was extreme looting and people just couldn't help themselves but to rob stores and take whatever they found. And interviews of these people would later reveal that the reason they decided to steal is because they saw other people stealing. And so that made it kind of reduced the moral temperature, so to speak. And they realized that they could get away with it. They saw other people kind of behaving like this, so they thought themselves, I can get away with it as well. And this is the problem with kind of groups in general. When people get into huge groups, it's very easy to become less moral because you can get away with a lot more. And that's why otherwise rational and moral people could be reduced to this kind of animalistic state. And once the beast within is unleashed, there's very little that can stop it. That primal essence is very powerful. And looting is not even the worst of it. Throughout history, this kind of collective uncaging of the beast, so to speak, has manifested in various forms. My parents lived through an example of this in Black July in Sri Lanka. Look it up if you want to see more. But, looting is not even the worst of it. It could get significantly worse. As terrifying as this is, it is almost inevitable. Humans are fundamentally creatures that are chained up. And it's inevitable that the chains will eventually loosen, or alternatively, the chains become too tight. If they become too tight, then that animalistic desire becomes stronger and it wants to get it even more, and it's more motivated to do so. And so it's almost inevitable that this dark side of humanity, the floodgates, so to speak, will be unleashed. Now, I see the werewolf imagery in my dreams as possibly describing this phenomenon, but I don't know if it's a recognition of the fact or just saying in general that this has the potential to happen, or it's attempting to warn me about this occurring possibly in the near future. Another possibility is that this just happens to be something that's on my mind. That's also possible. That I'm just thinking about this so often that my unconscious is just replaying what I'm thinking about consciously, and that in this way, and this otherwise doesn't really describe our current predicament. That's something we have to keep in mind as well. But I do think that some of the wider trends that have been happening in society recently are indicative of this happening on a larger scale, and it is a very present danger, which people, I guess, should be aware of. Another dream image which I saw, which is related to wolves, was that I was in the woods, and this dream was very long, but this key part was very important to me when I was in the woods and I saw these wolves walking by, a pack of them walking by, just roaming through the woods, and some of them were carrying the heads of elk, and these heads were enormous, way bigger than they should have been, way bigger than the wolves, and they were walking around with these severed elk heads, just the heads, by the way, not the rest of the bodies. And in the dream, I thought, well, they're just, this is just what they're eating. But when I thought about it more, it really reminded me of a movie called Princess Mononoke, when the spirit of the forest, basically like this god of the forest, it loses its head and becomes this chaos god and just starts to envelop everything. And of course, the head itself is also another symbol of kind of order and stability and consciousness. And of course, if you're losing your head, especially if you're losing your head to these wolf-like animals, it could be an indication of basically what I described earlier, of our kind of losing our morals, losing our heads, so to speak, and unleashing this more wolf side of ourselves. And again, when this happens, our moral principles that we all know and that we all kind of uphold can't really hold back this animalistic side of ourselves. And we are effectively reduced back to beasts, back to primal animals. Another very striking dream, which is somewhat related to what I just said before, and I've seen multiple times now, is that of the Earth Mother, or either arising from the sea or just seeming to pop out of nowhere, like in the middle of a city, and then causing the walls of the city to collapse. And what I mean by the Earth Mother is like this vague sense of this enormous Titan-like woman just walking around, and I just had the sense that like this is the Earth Mother, this is the essence of the Earth, and she's out to get us. She's very destructive. She destroys our cities, and the way she walked out of the Earth, it was very bizarre because she was followed by all of these spectral animals. By spectral, I mean like these ghostly figures of these animals, including whales and deer and all sorts of things, walking out of the ocean with her as she came to come and destroy us land beings, I guess. And again, like I said before, she actually tore down the walls of a city that I was in, and it was kind of chaotic in that sense. And again, the meaning of this stream is rather obvious, and that is nature is set to destroy us. The more we destroy nature, the more it will fight back to try and protect itself. Furthermore, we destroy nature at our own peril. We increase the likelihood of certain natural disasters. And so, of course, it's very natural that this would be a concern in my unconscious, that we're destroying nature at our peril, and that the more we destroy nature, the more we destroy ourselves. But again, another possibility is that the more we fight against nature and try to conquer nature, the more it will fight back and kind of have this backlash, and that can be destructive for us as well. Humans are not fundamentally separate from nature, and again, the reason I say this is related to the first image is because this could also be indication that the nature within us may be our own destruction. Our more natural side may itself be the source of destruction that my dream was attempting to forecast. Our inability to cooperate with nature is fast becoming a problem. You see that, for example, forest fires are becoming significantly more common, and so are floods. And we just consume. We leave plastic everywhere, and we're destroying the earth. But personally, I don't think nature itself is is at risk. Nature does have an astonishing ability to recover. What's at risk is us. We're destroying ourselves by destroying nature, because human society is very prone to collapse. It's a very unstable system, and if it experiences a certain degree of instability, it naturally precipitates dramatic changes. And so, the fact that the weather is changing so rapidly can only have kind of devastating consequences for us. And so, again, it's not necessarily that this is the apocalypse or anything. I've never really believed that. But what I believe instead is that this could precipitate enormous changes in human society and be very, very destructive, although not, endgame destructive. But again, it is an enormous risk that we always have to keep in mind, and that humans in general are just so bad at cooperating with nature. We just have this urge to consume everything and destroy everything, but we don't realize that we do it at our peril. And again, the nature will fight back. I recently saw a video of like these orcas attacking a ship, which is something they don't naturally do. And to me, it seems like an indication that they're aware of the fact that we're the ones polluting their environment and putting plastic everywhere. And so they're trying to fight us back. I've seen recently boars have been moving into our cities. And I see this as, again, part of the wider trend of nature trying to fight back and reclaim part of what was hers. Another dream, which is seemingly related to that Earth Mother image, was that I walked into this elevator, but something was wrong, because the elevator wasn't going up or down. Instead, it seemed to be going through time. It would just zoom immediately to the end of time, and then it would start back at the beginning of time, and then go through time again, and then over and over again, like this infinite loop. And I was just stuck in this elevator, and I didn't know what to do. And I was stuck in the elevator with 3 other people. But then suddenly, at some point during this whole thing, some woman appears, and I asked her, like, who are you? What are you? And she starts taking this green paint and starts painting her face green. Actually, I'm not sure what this whole thing was about, but it does seem related to that whole Earth Mother thing that I was talking about. But if you want to have a crack at trying to interpret that, be my guest. But over and above everything, by far the strangest dream that I had, the one that kind of made me want to make this video, and it just wouldn't end, was me at a church. The dream was much longer, but I guess the church part was the more significant thing. And in my dreams, churches always appear as symbols of order, of like moral order, in fact, of the highest order, because very often I'll have dreams of churches that are located on the very tops of skyscrapers, and I see that as a symbol of the highest possible order, which imposes its will upon everyone beneath. It's the order that's imposed from above, so to speak. But anyways, I was in this church, and I spent some time there before I had this moment of realization. And it was almost like I put on these glasses or something, because when I put them on, I could see all around me that this church was infested by demons. There were demons everywhere. And I'm talking like mean demons, not like little imps or anything, but very twisted beings, very like beings of pure darkness, and they were just walking around this whole place, defiling things, as demons do, and among them was none other than Satan himself, the OG demon, one could say, and he fell from the rafters of the church and landed, and then joined the other demons in doing whatever the heck they were doing. And I was running around this church looking for a way to escape, and when I came to the center of the church, in the center, where normally there's like a statue of Jesus or something, there was like this demonic relic. It looked super bizarre and super like satanic. And when I looked at this thing, I just instinctively knew that this thing, whatever I was looking at, was like the most evil thing I had ever looked upon. This was an absolute symbol of evil. Now, people are sometimes concerned when I have dreams about demons and other scary things, like even sleep paralysis and such. They think that like it must be traumatic or something, but honestly, it's fine. I'm more shaken by the things I see in real life than by whatever I see in my dreams. I know my dreams are just in my head. Like recently I was talking to my professor, and he was very concerned about the weird sleep paralysis things I've seen, but I was like, it's not a big deal. Like the other day I saw a squirrel get hit by a car, and that was more upsetting to me than any of the dreams I've seen. But regardless, I interpreted the meaning of this dream to be in line with the whole werewolf thing, and that is that the old system of order, the way order is represented in my psyche, has been utterly corrupted and is no longer a source of order. It can't fulfill its primary function, which is kind of to shackle the beastly side of humankind. It can no longer do that. We've lost our faith in kind of the church and possibly whatever system of order we used to believe in, and the beast is about to be unleashed, so to speak. The church can't hold it back anymore. The demonic forces that are working within us, which are really there and definitely a great danger, the old system of order that was in place to kind of deal with that can't do this anymore because it's been corrupted. It's being corrupted from the inside, and it's filled with demons. And so that means, the dark side of humanity is on the verge of being unleashed. At least that's what the dream seems to indicate. The modern Western world, as I've argued many times before, is built on the principles of Christianity, the moral principles of Christianity. Even if you aren't a Christian, even if you disagree with the church, it's very likely that most of your moral beliefs are derived from Christianity, are seen through a Christian lens. Even your ideas of good and evil are likely, if you're in the West, viewed through the lens of Christianity. But for most of history, this function of religion has depended to a degree on actual faith, on genuine faith that these morals were actually real and not just, something we made up. And this idea has been in decline for some time. But it seems now that it's on the verge of falling off a cliff, that very genuinely religious people can no longer find faith in their church, and that, whatever's been held back by the church is very much on the verge of just being released, and this dark side of humanity just seems like it's ready to come out. And so we should expect devastating consequences to follow. Now, again, there's always the possibility that this is just the weird stuff that's on my mind and that this doesn't reflect the outer world, but I have seen the wider kind of trends in the world around us, and I think that my dreams do speak to this. It's not merely a description of my own mind and my own worries and my anxieties, but rather what is potentially happening or potentially manifesting in the world around us, either in the present or potentially at some point in the future. I don't ever want to be too pessimistic. I kind of, I don't want to worry you guys too much, but I do have a strong sense of duty, the same way Jung did, to kind of record his dreams and share them as a potential warning of what the unconscious might be trying to tell us, of what possibly lays ahead, given everything that I've observed. And, we should have reason to expect the outbreak of chaos. Like I said at the beginning, these kinds of things are inevitable. In that sense, my dreams aren't even that prophetic. They're just merely descriptive, and they're kind of descriptive of something which should be obvious to most of you. And that is that at some point, the chains will be loosened. That's just an inevitability of being a human. They've been loosened in the past before. There have been these devastating outbreaks of psychic energy where people just unleashed their chaos and the whole world descended into chaos. And so it's not that crazy to suggest that this could also possibly be happening right now. And many countries have experienced these devastating outbursts of psychic energy and other calamities, such as coups and conflicts which just seem utterly intractable. Ethiopia, for example, recently is experiencing a mass psychosis and mass shadow projection, which is absolutely tearing the country apart. One of the most stable countries in Africa is just descending into chaos. And when one analyzes these wars, you could really see how war and conflict causes the demon to come forth. The amount of evil that lurks in the human spirit is on full display when you look at the atrocities that are committed in a conflict like that. The amount of raping and looting, the absolute disregard for your fellow human beings. It's really terrifying and really hard to swallow, but it is a reality. This is the world we live in. And so there is a kind of, you should be willing to face the reality bravely. Another serious problem with which the world is dealing with are these lockdowns. Now, I can see both sides of the argument, and I can see why you'd want to have a lockdown to prevent the spread of the virus and, giving healthcare workers a break because they're seriously exhausted. I'm very concerned about healthcare workers in particular, how much pressure they're under and how much stress they're under. But at the same time, lockdowns are very, very bad for our mental health. Any restriction of freedom inevitably causes backlash. And again, you get people into groups protesting these lockdowns, and things can escalate very quickly. And again, when people are protesting in groups, they're less likely to follow their own moral beliefs, and may resort to violence, which is why you see protests, for example, in Australia, becoming increasingly violent. But at the same time, you kind of understand where these people are coming from because of the amount of control that they're under, and the fact that these lockdowns are just so bad for your mental health. I think that a very intelligent person can rationalize and realize that these lockdowns have a purpose, and and kind of think of strategies to kind of negate the potential negative effects that they have on our mental health. But the average person isn't capable of that, and so it makes sense for them to experience this backlash and want to kind of fight against the government. But again, that itself could lead to immense amounts of destruction. There are also major political divisions across the world, and like I said before, coups taking place in all sorts of places like Myanmar and Sudan, and now you have military dictators running the country and cracking down on dissent, which just leads people to protest more, and it leads to this kind of vicious cycle of violence that just gets worse and worse as time goes on. The economies of various countries are reaching a breaking point, and also political extremism is growing. For example, in Pakistan, this extremist group is gaining immense amounts of power, and I view them as very dangerous because, again, as they protest in groups, there is no morality that's holding them back. That kind of animalistic side has a potential to just be unloosed. And there's a fairly good chance that economic collapses will occur soon. They're kind of already starting with inflation. And it's not just me saying that, and I don't want that to happen, obviously, but it does seem kind of inevitable given the pandemic. Another situation which is seriously concerning on a global scale is what happened in Afghanistan. The fact that the U.S. retreat was so poorly executed, and thousands of weapons were, fall into the wrong hands. And if you study recent history, you know that the amount of weapons getting into the wrong hands is a big factor in destabilizing certain regions. Northern Africa has been completely destabilized by the amount of weapons that have been flowing into Northern Africa right after Libya collapsed. And so we should expect kind of chaos to engulf Afghanistan, which is so sad for the people who've already gone through so much that they just have to go through so much more, and it's potentially even much worse. And so there's a good chance that Afghanistan will likely be overrun by psychos who, like the werewolves, are just seeking an outlet to unleash their primal urges. We could, that's basically what ISIS was. During that whole event, ISIS were just animals that were trying to find an outlet to unleash their animality and be free to rape and pillage in accordance with their animal instincts. And now this seems to be repeating itself in Afghanistan. There's a huge threat of this occurring in Afghanistan because of the amount of weapons that have just been left in the open. And it's just so sad to see how these cycles endlessly repeat themselves. It's like that line in Dune. There is no escape. We pay for the violence of our ancestors. Now, this may seem like gloom and doom and that everything is going to shit and everything's going to be chaos and this is the apocalypse. But firstly, I want to, among other things, I want to say that this isn't the apocalypse. Humans and human civilization has survived greater calamities than this before. We are a resilient species. We've gone through periods of immense chaos. And sure, they were devastating and they were difficult to endure, but we made it through them. So you should trust in yourself and those around you to be able to face this calamity with courage and bravery. Second, these kinds of things are inevitable. And so, there are forces on this planet and in the human psyche that are just so built into the way things function that these kinds of events are inevitable. And so there's nothing that can really be done to stop it. And so you may feel the sense of guilt. Why didn't I do more to kind of prevent the kind of outcome? And the truth is you probably couldn't. This whole thing is very much inevitable. And as devastating as it is, we've been through worse, like I said before. And the fact that we've overcome worse things than this should give you a sense of courage and a sense of hope because it's possible to make it through this. And to be clear as well, periods of chaos like this are catalysts for better futures. The period, World War II was a horrifying, devastating event. But after World War II, the world became significantly better, significantly more technologically advanced, but also the life of the average person greatly increased. Obviously not for everybody. There were still some conflicts in certain places. But for in general, humans, it was an era of unprecedented prosperity. And so even though we have to go through periods of chaos like this, we should expect that by the end of it, the fertile soil will be there for a new, better society to emerge from it. But that doesn't stop the fact that we need to go through this darkness. We have to make it through it in order to see the other side. So should you be worried about this? To an extent, yes, but to an extent, no. Like I said, all of this was inevitable, and you can be calm and serene without worrying about it. You didn't contribute to this, or even if you did, it's not your fault necessarily. And so you can be calm and serene throughout this whole thing, and realize that in the end, it's almost like none of it really mattered. Take comfort in the fact that we've survived worse, and our ancestors were capable of making it through it. And you're the progeny of people who escaped worse devastating calamities than what we're facing now. And so it's within you to survive and overcome something like this. And even if death finds you early, be calm and serene. Death comes for everybody inevitably. He who tries to flee death forever is a fool. The universe is set up in a way that nobody escapes death. So if it happens now or if it happens later, it makes no difference. This is the knowledge you need in order to not fear death. Only one who has escaped his fear of death is fit for becoming deathless. And only those who escape the fear of death will be best prepared to face what is coming ahead. So don't fear death, and don't even fear suffering. You may be worried that this whole calamity will entail a great deal of suffering, and it probably will. But I find And you might find as well that your spirit can endure a great deal of suffering, just as those who survived the Holocaust were able to. The human spirit is remarkably resilient, and so never doubt your capacity to endure immense amounts of suffering and adversity. I see two paths through this calamity, and both of them are choices you can make. Don't worry about any of this. Be calm, be serene, let the universe run its course. Or you can push against the universe, like somebody swimming against the current. Great epochs like this are spiritual tests for humanity. And if you can become heroic during this age and simply not just flow with the mind of the crowd and actually stand up for what you believe is morally right based on your principles, rather than kind of reverting back to your animality, it will open the gates of heaven, so to speak. We have gone too far. We have become too spiritually developed, and I personally refuse to let go of the spiritual progress we made and revert back to animals. The world is too good. My own life has been too good, and I want that life for people in the future. I don't want them to have to suffer through calamities because of our mistakes. And remember, you will not need to face this calamity alone. There are others. There are many others, true heroes who will not bend to evil. Either the evil within themselves or the evil without. And such people will stand like pillars amidst the flood. But again, there is no obligation for you to be a hero in the world that's coming. You can be calm, you can be serene, and you can know that all of this is part of a wider plan. From a wider perspective, you will begin to realize that even evil can be beautiful. Even evil is a part of this story. And in fact, it is the mechanism through which a greater good is produced. And knowing this, you can be relaxed and even delight in about what is about to unfold. I wish I could reach a state like that where I could see the craziness in the world as tributary to its whole. And you should kind of develop this mentality that even evil is the mechanism through which a greater good is produced. Good luck to all of you. Trust in yourself and be prepared for this test, which I do believe is inevitably coming. If it doesn't come, that would be great. And I'll look like a complete idiot. But I think the warning is necessary because it's anybody who could see the world right now can see what's coming. An age of absolute calamity. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I have a few guesses. But this will be an epoch of great tribulation. And if we can survive, if we can make it through the end of this, a better world will emerge from the darkness. The heroes among you will be exalted, and your courage is a testament to the heavenly ideals that we've built for ourselves, and the hope that a better world lay beyond the darkness. Do not falter. Do not let chaos destroy everything you love. But even if it does, if everything does fall to shadow, don't worry about it. For in the end, none of this really matters. It was kind of just a big dream. Take it easy. See ya.